Welcome back. We're going to go ahead and jump right into Matthew chapter 2. If you'd like to take a second to read it before we jump into it, just pause this video and come back in a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. Last time we read Matthew chapter 1. We went through the genealogy of Jesus Christ. We learned that the genealogy went through Joseph because talking to Jews, Matthew would have wanted to make sure that they understood that Jesus actually was in line to be an heir to David. He could claim a legal right to be an heir to David and to sit on the throne of Israel. So now, we also learned that Mary was a virgin when she got pregnant with Jesus. She remained a virgin until after she had Jesus, but then after that she did have natural children with her husband Joseph. All right, so chapter 2. Wise men visit the king. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him." So, wise men from the east. Let's start there. These wise men from the east were not three kings. They did carry very expensive gifts, but that does not mean they were kings. The scriptures do not say that there were three. That is a tradition that someone turned into a song. Scholars believe that these were probably Chaldeans. And so they would have learned the prophecies about the coming king during the exile to Babylon. So they would have been watching out for him. We saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him. So Chaldeans were known to be astronomers, but they were also known to be astrologers. This is not the Bible condoning astrology. Under any circumstances are we to take that. Excuse me. But we just need to know. These were guys that they came from polytheistic religions. They had no problem adding a god to their pantheon. But the truth is, it says, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" It doesn't say born a god. It says born King of the Jews. So what they understood was this person who was heralded by a star was to be a king. We have come to worship him, they say. And that word worship, it's also translated, the same word translated as serve. It is also translated as pay homage to. And so what they're saying is, we came to bow down to him. That doesn't necessarily mean they came to worship him like you would worship a god. When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. King Herod. Herod was half Jewish. He was raised as a Jew, but he was a king. And I think it's safe to say that he loved his position more than he loved his God. And he was deeply disturbed when he heard this. And all Jerusalem with him. Definitely anybody who was at court that day, in the king's court, and had heard the Chaldeans or the wise men say this, they would have been disturbed, because these are powerful people, and if there's a new king, what happens to their position? But even if the news filtered out into the street, what is the common man thinking? Well, if somebody else was born the king, and this is how we've got it under Herod, what are we to expect from a new king Is there going to be some kind of a civil war? What's going to go on? People would have been disturbed. How much prophecy did the common person know? Would they have known that these men followed a star to find the king that was born? And would they have known that that was actually prophecy for Israel's benefit? So he assembled, verse 4, so he assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people and asked them where the Christ would be born. In Bethlehem of Judea, they told him, because this is what was written by the prophet. Verse 6, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. And that is found in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. So he finds out that the king that was prophesied was to be born in Bethlehem. Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." There was a reason. There was a reason that he wanted to know what time the star appeared. And we'll find out later. But obviously, if they're coming from the east, it wasn't yesterday. You know, they didn't get on an airplane. They didn't get in their car. They didn't drive their motorcycle. They didn't, they took camels. They took a caravan. They probably waited for a caravan to come through because this is how people traveled long distances for safety. There's safety in numbers. They also, we'll find out, they're bringing expensive gifts, and so they would have had to have time to gather those gifts. Possibly even, it's possible they were serving kings, and so they may have had to wait for a leave of absence from their king for permission to leave. So, but Herod says, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." Herod, we already know, was deeply disturbed at the thought of a king being born and usurping his place. And the question is, did he really want to go and worship the child? I am sorry, guys. I really don't mean to be like all squirmy and wiggly, but this is the real me. I was outside today with a whole lot of mosquitoes. Verse 9. After hearing the king, they went on their way, and there it was, the star they had seen at its rising. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. Okay, so after hearing the king, they went on their way. There it was, the star they had seen at its rising. So it sounds to me like they saw the star, they saw where it was, they followed it, but then they lost it. And whether they lost it, I don't know, in their towns, did they have light pollution like we have now? I don't think they had as much light pollution as we do now, but I don't know. On movies, you always see in the big cities of the ancient world, they had torches on the walls. Did they have that? I have no clue. Why did they lose the star? I don't know. But sure enough, the star reappeared, and they're overjoyed. They're happy. They're seeing the star, and the star had been going forward, and now it's directly above this house. And they can look down. That's the house right there. See, there's the star. There's the house. We're going to the house. And so they go to the house. They enter the house. They saw the child with Mary, his mother. The wise men did not show up on the first Christmas night. We always see the movies, the stories, the videos, the nativity sets with Jesus inside a stable and shepherds and wise men and Mary and Joseph and all the animals. And it didn't look anything like that. People a whole lot smarter than me have really looked into the history and the culture and the customs of this area of the world at the time when Jesus was born. And some people say, oh, well, they would have had stone stables out in the nowhere, out in the country, whatever. But no, in the town of Bethlehem, the very small town with about 300 people in it, according to some estimates, people would have had a house. People would have had a house with 2 levels. The lower level is where they would bring the animals in for the night. Whether it's their goat or their whatever their animal is. And they would have, they would feed their animal there. It was like a barn dough. They lived in a barn dough. Okay. It was barn on the bottom, apartment upstairs. Except that Joseph and Mary were visiting family in Bethlehem. They did not live in Bethlehem. This was not their home they were at. When another gospel says that Jesus was laid in a manger because there was no room in the inn, people think of a hotel, and there was no hotel. The word translated as inn was a guest room, and usually they would build a room up on the roof of their house. They had flat roofs. They would build a room on the roof of their house for the guests to stay in. But Joseph's family would have converged on Bethlehem to their family homes, and they would have stayed with relatives. And my little red light, or my little white light just went out. That's great. Fully charged. It lasts for 5 minutes. All right. So anyway, there's no room in the guest room for a man and his new wife who is very much pregnant. And especially once Mary gives birth, she will be unclean for a certain amount of time, and nobody can touch her. Nobody can be in the room with her, sleeping with her, and all that kind of stuff. No, it's not going to happen. She needs to be isolated. And for health reasons. Really, for health reasons. So, they had no choice but to go down into the barn area of the house. So, just to clear that up, we're assuming either Joseph and Mary are still living with family at the time that the wise men show up 2 years later, or they've gotten their own home. But either way, wise men did not go to a barn or a stable to visit Jesus. All right, so continuing on. Where did I go? Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. Interestingly enough, we don't hear anything about these gifts when Jesus is older. We never again hear about these gifts. And all I can surmise is that perhaps they were used to pay for Jesus's upbringing. So, gold is money. Frankincense, well, nowadays we know of frankincense that it's actually a medicine. It is a very fragrant plant. I think it's from a tree. If you know where frankincense comes from, put it in the comments, please. I think it is from a tree, but I can't swear to it. But I do know that it can be used for incense. It's also a very strong anti-inflammatory drug, topical compound that you can put on to relieve pain. Myrrh was it was used in burials. So they would use myrrh inside the wrappings or to anoint the person's body before they buried them. So we have the gold, we have the frankincense, we have the myrrh. We never hear of them again. So I suspect that the gold was used, it was money. The frankincense and myrrh were probably sold at some point. Or possibly used, because how much do we know about Joseph? Maybe the myrrh was used in his burial. It's all speculation. It's all speculation. We just don't know. Okay, so being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. Okay, so now the flight into Egypt. And this is interesting. Because I read something about this earlier today. After they were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Get up, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to kill him." Isn't it interesting that somebody else who was going to say, like, how do I put this? Joseph takes Jesus into Egypt to save Jesus. Another Joseph was sold into slavery into Egypt. Joseph saved Israel. And Jesus, who is brought into Egypt, will save Israel, but not just Israel, but the whole world. And so that connection with that name Joseph going into Egypt is it a coincidence? I don't know. But it's interesting. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and escaped to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod's death, so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Out of Egypt I called my son." And that was Hosea chapter 11. So God called Israel out of Egypt, but he also called Jesus out of Egypt, and that's who he's talking about here. Out of Egypt I called my son. So Jesus was sent to Egypt to save his life, and then he was brought out of Egypt to save ours. Then Herod, when he realized that he had been outwitted by the wise men, flew into a rage. He gave orders to massacre all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, in keeping with the time he had learned from the wise men. Then what was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah weeping, in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children. And she refused to be consoled because they are no more. Rachel was the wife of Jacob. Israel. And she is considered a mother to all of Israel, although she herself only gave birth to Joseph and Benjamin. She died right after giving birth to Benjamin. And she was buried in Ramah or Ramah. And she, before she died, she had wept, but she was comforted with the knowledge that she was giving birth to a son. But this time, Rachel's voice, and this is poetic, this is figurative. Rachel's voice is being heard to cry out from her grave for all the children who were slaughtered, regardless to what tribe they were from. And she can't be comforted because this time, instead of being told you have a son and he's alive, now she's being told many sons are dead. This is a hard verse for me. The thought of children being massacred. Here in the United States, we've seen it a lot, actually. People going in and killing our children in schools because nobody's allowed to be in those schools who's prepared to defend the children. And our whole nation mourns for those children who are lost to us. And that's really what this verse is about. A voice was heard in Ramah weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be consoled because they are no more. In this case, all of Israel would have been mourning, but especially the mothers of those little boys ripped out of their arms and slaughtered right in front of them. Return to Nazareth, verse 19. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, because those who intended to kill the child are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and entered the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the region of Galilee. Then he went and settled in a town called Nazareth to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. I wish I could remember, and I meant to write down the website I was reading. It was an article about the parallels between the two Josephs, the Joseph of the Old Testament and the Joseph of the New Testament. And what the author had said was they were both dreamers. God spoke to them both in dreams. And isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Sometimes God uses the past to show us what's going to happen in the future. And this is one of those times when he used a Joseph who was a dreamer to save Israel. And now he's used another Joseph who was a dreamer, again going into Egypt and then coming out and saving Israel. Of course, the Old Testament, Joseph didn't come out of Egypt. He died there. But his son's children, grandchildren, many times great-grandchildren came out. All right. Then he went and settled in a town called Nazareth to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. Now, here is something I am going to admit that's a little bit embarrassing, because I like to think of myself as really smart. But when it comes to the Bible and Christianity, there is so much that I'm still learning. I used to confuse Nazarene and Nazarite, and they are completely different things. Nazarene is somebody who lived in Nazareth, and culturally they were looked down on a lot. This was small town hillbilly type people. They were not esteemed. They were not considered educated or wealthy or sophisticated in any way. And so Jesus was called a Nazarene. He wasn't a Nazarene. I mean, he lived in Nazareth, but he was from Bethlehem. And this actually is one of the reasons that in future, in Jesus's future, our past, in Jesus's adult life during his ministry, so many of the Jews rejected him because they knew that he was from Nazareth. They didn't know that he was from Bethlehem. So, yeah. So, a Nazarite is someone who has taken a vow to live a certain way. They don't cut their hair. They don't eat the fruit of the grapevine. I don't know what else is involved, but it has to do with living a certain way for a certain amount of time to serve God. And that's not what Jesus was. Jesus was known as a Nazarene. So, what have we learned? We have learned wise men are not kings. They didn't show up for 2 years after Jesus was born. Jesus was born in a barndominium, on the animal part of the barndominium, the barn part. Jesus was taken into Egypt to save his life. He was brought back out of Egypt. And while Jesus was in Egypt, all of the children in Bethlehem, all of the 2-year-old boys and under, were murdered. So that is what we have learned. The really neat thing about Matthew is that he points out to his readers what prophecies were fulfilled in Jesus' lifetime. And we've already seen, so this prophecy was fulfilled, or it was to fulfill this prophecy, and we're going to see a whole lot more. And to a Jew, that's really, really important. But to us Gentiles, that should also be important. And the reason that should be important is because it shows us, if we've not been raised in a Christian home, if we've not been raised reading the Bible and hearing these things and knowing who God is, it shows us that God has been involved from the very beginning. Beginning. And there has never been a time when he didn't have a plan. Because God knew when he made the first man and woman what decisions they would make and what the consequences would be of those decisions. He knew sin was going to happen. But he gave us free will anyway. Because only with free will can there be true love. I mean, think about it. Have you ever seen a movie or read a story where somebody used a love potion and made someone fall in love with them? I'm going to admit something, and some people will say, oh, that's blasphemy or it's sin or something like that, but I love Harry Potter. And in one of the Harry Potter books, a girl sends Harry chocolates with a love potion in it. And Ron eats the chocolates. And he falls madly in love with this girl. But it's not real. Because he doesn't have his free will. So God gave us free will. Without it, we can't love. But he knew that with that free will, we were going to mess up royally. And we did. And the first two humans chose to disobey God. And in that moment, God already had a plan, and he laid it out for Eve, what the plan was. And it is so important that we remember prophecy, that we see the prophecies that were fulfilled, so that we can know as Gentiles that God was always involved in the salvation of our souls. We're not an afterthought. He chose Israel to be the starting point of getting the word about him out, of teaching people how to worship him. But he always meant for everybody in the entire world to be saved. Friend, we are learning about Jesus right now. And we have gotten to the first maybe 3 or 4 years of his life as he's come back from Egypt. We've got another 30 years to go. But already we have seen so many prophecies that have been fulfilled with his life. If right now you are not a Christian, you have not placed your trust in Jesus, please do so. Place your trust in Jesus because you know that he was the fulfillment of a promise from God. He is God, and he did come to this earth, fully God and fully man, to pay the penalty for our sins. Trust in him and you will be saved. And next time we're going to get into chapter 3. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for sending Jesus. Thank you so much for preserving this history of his life and for sending this one apostle to write these things down and to connect Jesus' life with the prophecies. Please be with everybody watching this right now and speak into their hearts and just show them the reality of you. I ask in Jesus' name. Amen. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, share, and comment so that you don't miss a single Bible study. I'll try to upload a Bible study once a week. Until next time, God bless you, and thanks for watching.